Welcome everyone to our afternoon session. My name's Jane Thomason and I'm absolutely delighted to be part of the conference. I've been in Sydney, now I'm down in Melbourne. Really looking forward to hearing not only what's going on with Blockchain Australia, but the blockchain roadmap and some of the innovators in Australia who are doing some of the awesome work in blockchain. And that's all I'm going to say in the kickoff because I'd like to have a few closing remarks at the end. I'm very excited to be sitting here with Adam Poulton, who's the chairperson at Blockchain Australia, which in a way is an old organisation, but it's a new organisation because it came together with the Digital Commerce Association and formed a stronger, louder, more powerful body to represent the industry in Australia. So Adam, welcome.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for the great introduction. Yeah, so I think you'll agree that it's been an amazing week so far. 4 days of action-packed events and great discussions for the inaugural Blockchain Australia Blockchain Week 2021. It's enabled so many lively discussions over 3.5 days with so much valuable input from a wide variety of people across so many businesses and organisations. On behalf of the Blockchain Australia board, I thank everyone for their valuable time, efforts and expertise in the event so far. With so many intellectual discussions, particularly today from many people smarter than myself, I wanted to spend a bit of time on the other side of the discussion and the other things that Blockchain Australia has done in the community. It's been heartening to see the engagement and the community that we've had during the planning and execution of this event. And it's a testament to the ideals of the Bitcoin and the blockchain communities, being decentralization, collaboration, and consensus. Personally, it's also been the privilege of a lifetime to have been involved in this community over the past 8 years or so, and to play my small part in the emergence of an industry and community that I believe has and will continue to change the world. The journey for me started as I was discovering this technology in 2011. And at the time I was juggling duties of my young family with 2 young children, the burden of a large mortgage that I'd just taken out a few years previous, the prospect of an emerging financial crisis and a business as a tradesman at the time that never seemed to be progressing. And despite the dedication of hard work, the decade of hard work and dedication, I didn't really ever seem to be getting ahead. But the exciting thing with this new technology that I discovered, and we called it Bitcoin because blockchain hadn't been invented yet as a word, was that it was asking me for help. It wanted me to download a wallet. It wanted me to pay Bitcoin, wanted to pay me Bitcoins for securing the network. And it wanted me to talk to my family and friends about Bitcoin so that we could share the technology and we could collaborate and send payments to each other. It was asking me to build a business and to make Bitcoin usage easier. And it was asking me to advocate for it and to spread the word. What Bitcoin had given me was a voice and a way to make change, a voice that the existing system hadn't given me and had never asked me for. And this voice is baked into the code. So nodes allow everyone to have a say on the code base that runs Bitcoin. The miners receive Bitcoin for the expenditure of their resources and receive a financial voice in how the new money is used. Industry participants have a voice as they build value over time and develop the network effects around the Bitcoin blockchain that make the system even stronger. And these businesses come together as an association to have a voice as we open the discussions with government and regulatory bodies. As we've discussed today, we're still at the beginning of this road and there's a lot more to do. And it wasn't only me that found a voice in those early days. There were people all over the world joining chat groups, posting on social media, writing blog posts, filming YouTube videos, and making Bitcoin mining rigs and nodes. All of them finding the voice and all of them building their little part of the system according to their expertise or interest. The code has got to building better wallets and making transferring and saving Bitcoin easier. The lawyers got to writing submissions to remove unfair legal and taxation consequences. The educators got to teaching people about Bitcoin and the how and why of blockchain and other ways it could be used. The collaborators got to building people networks, and the organizers got onto working on a path to wider adoption wider acceptance, and a future time that there'd be 5 or 10 or 1,000 times more voices at the table. And this was my part to play. Starting with a little enthusiasm, I started conversations with others, and were as keen as when we're looking for ways that I could explore to make this a better way. As a group, we sought out meetups so that we could get together to discuss new ideas, and we joined online forums to discuss innovative business ideas and start organising to advance our advocacy goals. It was one of these meetups after I'd boarded a plane and travelled across the seas to Melbourne from my home state of Tasmania. My Google Maps gave me some obscure directions, and it literally took me up a dark alleyway, 2 flights of stairs, and into the first shared offices of Conja. Although I didn't know it at the time, I was on my way to meeting Dale, and following on from that, a wider group of people that would eventually become the Bitcoin Association of Australia. It was then also during our early meetings where Pantelis, Tristan, Leo, Jason, Max, Martin and myself met a young curly-haired man called Ron. Although Ron had founded successfully ADCA initially, we would later cross paths and join forces about 6 years after our initial meeting. And this was where Blockchain Australia was formed. Our voice had grown stronger yet again. The emergence of the blockchain technology has given everyone that wants to help the ecosystem a voice at the table, and this is the joy of participating in the industry. There are so many intelligent individuals with wisdom beyond their years, so many people with time and energy to devote to a fairer world, and so many people with the enthusiasm, dedication and commitment to turn up week after week, devote their time, their money, their expertise to strengthen Bitcoin, strengthen blockchains, and strengthen their voice to make the world a better place. I think in the future years, we'll look back on 2021 as the end of the early phase of adoption and the time that the classic hockey stick of adoption takes off, where seemingly one day there was no one hearing our voice. And then the next, when we're invited to the ASX to discuss Bitcoin and blockchain, where Coinbase goes public and becomes one of the largest banks in the world by market cap, and where we have a national strategy from the federal government to progress the industry. The National Blockchain Roadmap, as you will hear later on this afternoon, is an adventurous and encouraging project to advance this industry even faster. With Chloe and Tim now on the team, our voice is stronger. Seemingly overnight, our collective voices have been heard and will continue to be heard in the coming decades. Before I finish up this afternoon, I want to add my voice of thanks to someone in this room and on this Zoom who has talked to everyone over the past few weeks. Someone that has heard your voice and invited you to be a part of the conversation. Thanks, Steve, and I'm not sure where Steve is at the moment, but you have a wonderful ability to bring people together, to foster discussion, and to bring out the voices that together have been instrumental in the progress that we've seen in the Australian blockchain space and in Blockchain Australia, now in its 8th year. I'm sure you'll welcome even more voices in the association as the industry grows, and we'd be interested to talk to anyone else that wants to talk to us and join us in these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Steve, and thanks to Ron as well, who've been pioneers. It's been very exciting to be part of an industry that starts from nothing and to remember the history of it. And I remember back in 2017 in Adelaide at the Blockchain Summit in Adelaide talking about a blockchain roadmap. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today, actually knowing that there is a blockchain roadmap and people are working on it and the government is backing it. So we're really pleased to have Tim Bradley here as our next speaker, Acting Head of the Division of Technology and National Security from the Department of Industry and Science, and the Acting Chair of the Blockchain Roadmap Steering Committee. Tim, thanks so much for joining us. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Jane. I'll jump in. Thank you, Jane, for that introduction, and thank you to Steve and Adam and Blockchain Australia for inviting me to speak today. It's been an amazing week that you've been able to pull together. The amount of blockchain week activity that's filling my my Twitter and LinkedIn feeds would have me believe that nothing else has transpired over the last 3 days. It's been pretty incredible. As Jane mentioned, my name is Tim Bradley. I'm currently the acting division head for the Department of Industry's Technology and National Security Division, and I chair the steering committee that oversees the implementation of the National Blockchain Roadmap. Chloe White, who I'll hand over to in a moment, and I have been asked here today to give an update on the blockchain landscape, the progress we've made on the roadmap, and give a bit of a preview of what's to come. I thought it might be useful to start with a quick look under the hood and give some context about how the roadmap, context to the roadmap and how it came about. When it comes to technology, DISA, and more specifically the technology division that I come from, has 2 main functions. One, we develop policies and implement programs that help develop Australia's tech sector. And 2, we develop policies and programs that assist with the take-up of those technologies by businesses, governments, government agencies, regulators, so on. You can imagine that there's a Venn diagram out there that takes those 2 functions and puts a technology like blockchain squarely in the middle. What is it that we need to do to enable the blockchain industry to develop and thrive on a global stage? And what's preventing our businesses and agencies from availing themselves of the opportunities that blockchain technologies present? Finding an answer to either of those questions, I think, will greatly assist in answering the other. These objectives, and this kind of being our starting point, I think positions DISA, the Department of Industry, quite differently to other parts of government, particularly those that may have a more specific role in, say, regulation or market design. And I think ultimately it means that we approach a lot of problems from a different angle. The National Blockchain Roadmap, for example, was released a little over a year ago, is very much a case in point. The roadmap was intended as a plan to, I'm quoting here, get the basics right for Australia's maturing blockchain industry, such that we were well positioned to take advantage of the valuable business opportunities and the growth in jobs this technology can enable. It certainly recognises the enormous economic potential of the technology, as well as Australia's world-class capabilities. It certainly wasn't a case of tech for the sake of tech. Indeed, I want to stress that that's a very competitive space that we're operating here in a policy sense. And there was a very high threshold that needed to be met before the roadmap was developed. The roadmap comprises of 12 what we call signposts. These are commitments by government to proactively address challenges and embrace investment and opportunity, progressing towards a blockchain-empowered future. They included actions to be undertaken across government over the next 5 years. I'm very happy to be here today and say that even with the interruption of the COVID pandemic, we are well progressed on delivering the roadmap. Indeed, 7 of the 12 signposts have already been actioned, and we're just a few months gone over the 1-year anniversary of its launch. The signpost that I'm personally the proudest of is signpost 1, which was just the creation of the National Blockchain Roadmap Steering Committee. The SteerCo is made up of DISA, Blockchain Australia, and representatives from across the sector, some who you're about to hear from. The SteerCo has been, for the department, our window into the sector, and I believe an incredibly effective forum for identifying the IRL issues that we're trying to solve, be they research, commercialization, startups, procurement, regulation, export. It's been such an effective mechanism that it's become the model mechanism for how we approach other policy issues in the department. Through the SteerCo, we've been able to establish 4 collaborative working groups. These working groups are out there exploring potential use cases and assessing the economic opportunities of those use cases, and identifying technical, regulatory, and other barriers to adoption. The working groups cover supply chains, credentialing, RegTech, and cybersecurity, and include representation from more than 70 non-government participants. They're also observed by government agencies like RBA, ASIC, Austrac, Agriculture, Productivity Commission, and of course, DISA. The working groups are progressing what we're calling their discovery reports, and their learnings are proving to be an invaluable input into policy development. I'm really enthused by the degree of proactive engagement by the sector. Within my broad remit sits other technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum, cyber, industry 4.0. But I think it's the blockchain community who I will say are certainly the most active and often the most frank. For what it's worth, the signpost that I'm, I guess, second proudest of, if I can say that, is signpost 4. Signpost 4 is all about establishing a network of, let's call them, blockchain enthusiasts within the public sector. The APS blockchain network, which we launched towards the end of last year, is a grassroots movement stretching across Commonwealth, state and territory governments, linking together professionals from a range of subject matter, showcasing best practice, demonstrating applications, and offering a platform to discuss the missteps and do-overs when it comes to blockchain. I honestly think that in years to come, we will look back at this network and credit it for driving the behavioral change needed and increasing the number of agencies that are leaning into blockchain technologies as a solution to their problems. I should say that outside of the roadmap, there are, of course, a number of agencies that are already investing in blockchain solutions within government. The Australian Border Force, for example, has recently completed a successful blockchain trial in partnership with Singapore to digitise trade processes. The Reserve Bank has been undertaking trials of a central bank digital currency in partnership with CommBank, NAB, Perpetual, and Consensus. Actually, I encourage, when they're up, I encourage everyone to go back to watch Monday's panel discussion of that project. Absolutely fascinating. IP Australia has been trialling the smart trademark that allows trademark owners to prove they are authentic owner of a brand. It's an anti-counterfeiting initiative and has been applied to NRL merchandise and is now being applied to Indigenous Kakadu plant products. And the Department of Defence has just embarked on a proof of concept exercise to test how blockchain can support defence supply chains. The roadmap is not the only mechanism through which government is supporting the sector to develop. In the past, support has been provided through programs like the Entrepreneurs Program, Australian Research Council grants, and trade missions led by Austrade. The government, together with Standards Australia, has been very active in setting international blockchain standards. And my department regularly engages with our counterparts in the US, Europe, Singapore, and elsewhere in bilateral or multilateral forums on these issues. Very excitingly, we saw two significant announcements, two significant initiatives announced as part of the 2020 budget in last October. The government's digital business plan included funding of $11.4 million for a new BRE challenge round that had a focus on RegTech. And it had $6.9 million to support 2 blockchain pilots. Let me focus on the pilots now, but I do encourage people to check out those RegTech challenges, which only went live last week. The 2 blockchain pilots have grants available of up to $3 million each. They're intended to demonstrate the potential for blockchain technologies to reduce regulatory compliance burden for businesses, encourage broader take-up of productivity-boosting technologies, and help bolster blockchain literacy. Both are expected to deliver a production-grade solution over the next 11 months. The first pilot will develop a solution in the critical minerals sector and contribute to the Critical Minerals National Ethical Certification Scheme. The second will develop a solution to the challenges of complying with excise tax regulations throughout spirit production and supply. We are running an open competitive process. Applications close in 1 week. Chloe and I are very excited to see what kind of response that we receive. That's what I came to say. I'll wrap up now. I'll hand you over to Chloe, who's going to talk about what to expect next from the National Blockchain Roadmap for the year to come. And I'll just finish with a final thought and say that the Prime Minister has a set of vision for Australia to become a leading digital economy by 2030. Thinking about what that world will look like, how connected it will be, and how prominent data will feature really highlights to me the potential and opportunity for blockchain and the importance of the work that we're doing here today. I look forward to continue collaborating with you all, and it's about time, but I welcome the opportunity to keep driving down this road together. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and it's wonderful to hear your enthusiasm and pride in some of the things that have been accomplished. And we agree with you that this is a really pivotal moment and a lot's going to be achieved in this community. So I'd now love to hear from Chloe, who's been carrying a lot of the day-to-day work with the roadmap, and hear how things have been going from her point of view. Chloe, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jane. And thank you, Adam, for your great introductory comments reflecting on the journey. And thank you, Tim, for that overview of, how we got to where we are, how we work, and why we do what we do. I particularly liked your reflections, Tim, on the APS blockchain network. That's certainly something that we're looking to expand on in the second year of the roadmap. We've got 6 events planned for 2021. So on average, that's 1 event every second month, but it's not just about events and education. It's also about capturing lessons learned from real world activity undertaken in government. So certainly share that enthusiasm and optimism for the APS blockchain network. But what I want to do in the time that I have available today is set out a few key milestones that we're focusing our energy and attention on for the second year of implementation. And I'm sort of setting down a few markers here for what I would suggest that people could look out for and what to expect as the second year unfolds. And the best place to start is the pilots. So as Tim just described, we have 2 pilots that are open for grant applications at the moment. The pilots are very ambitious projects. They combine supply chains with RegTech, and grantees are expected to deliver a production grade solution in 11 months. But the grants are not just about creating software solutions. The grant recipients will also be expected to promote the startup sector. So showcasing Australian talent is something that we really want to get out of this exercise. And they'll also be expected to support blockchain literacy, including by producing 2 reports that distill the unique value add of using blockchain for RegTech in supply chains over using other technologies, and also furthering our understanding of the trade-offs inherent in different implementations of blockchain technology, because we know that different DLT systems optimize for different outcomes and they all do come with different trade-offs. So what that will do is it will create value well beyond just the businesses involved in the pilots and the stakeholders who participate. The pilots are really designed to contribute to the overall objectives of the National Blockchain Roadmap. And I know that over the course of this week, there've been so many discussions about blockchain literacy, and I think that that is such a big priority for me and in my work. The applications do close in 1 week, so that'll be next Thursday, the 29th of April. And maybe I'll go into a little bit more granular detail in terms of milestones of what to expect with this through to the end of this financial year, because we won't actually know who the successful recipients are straight away. There is an assessment process once the applications close next week, and that process takes around 2 months to go through. It's quite involved. So I think the first thing that's relevant to point out is the grantees will be selected via a process that is open and competitive and merit-based. So all applications will be assessed against the program opportunity guidelines that have been published on business.gov.au. And the successful applicants will be the ones that make strong claims against each of the selection criteria that we've published online. And that's really important. And, you know, for those of you who are on the call or watching afterwards who might have been present at the launch event that we had for Blockchain Week, one of the points that I emphasized in my remarks at that event is it's very important to make sure that all of us in the ecosystem are operating as transparently and fairly as we all can. And that's certainly the approach that we're taking to these pilots. So the selection process has 3 phases. The phase 1, what will happen in phase 1 is there'll be grant program experts at AusIndustry who conduct an eligibility assessment against each application. So in case you're not familiar with AusIndustry, they are kind of like a sub-unit within the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources. And once they've sorted through those applications, the applications that AusIndustry considers to be eligible, those subset of applications will proceed to the merit assessment stage. So that is phase 2. So what happens in phase 2 is eligible applications will be assessed by a committee of 4 members. And these 4 members of the committee come from diverse areas of the department. The committee is constructed to ensure coverage across areas of expertise in blockchain, in emerging technology, in supply chains, grant programs as well. The committee is required to assess each application against the selection criteria, which, as I mentioned, are published on business.gov.au. So that will include how well it meets the criteria, how it compares to other applications, whether it provides value with relevant money. And when assessing whether the application represents value for money, the committee will have regard to the overall objectives of the grant opportunity, the evidence provided to demonstrate how the project contributes to meeting those objectives, the relative value of the grant sought as well. So each pilot is up to $3 million each. And all of the assessments are peer reviewed. So for each application in this phase, a second committee member will provide that peer review to ensure that there is moderation across all of the assessments. What the committee will do then is provide a ranked merit list of all the eligible applications, and they will make a recommendation for funding to the program delegate. And this is where we move into phase 3. So the program delegate is within AusIndustry. So phase 3, we go back to AusIndustry. The program delegate decides which grants to approve, taking into account the recommendations of the committee from phase 2 and the availability of grant funds. So as you can see, it's quite a detailed process. We move through it in a really systematic way. If you have any inquiries about the pilots, and thank you to everyone who has been engaging with AusIndustry. AusIndustry are absolutely the right people and the best people for you to be liaising with. So if you haven't already got in touch with AusIndustry and you would like to, you can call them on 13 28 46. They're open till 8 p.m. every business day. So you can call them tonight when Blockchain Week is over. But 13 28 46 is if you want to call them, or you could send an email to digitalprograms@industry.gov.au. You know, Google them, go to their website. They even have a chat box as well. So that's my little plug for the pilots there. And just emphasizing again what Tim said, that we are really excited to see what response we get. And, you know, it's a really great opportunity representing the biggest investment that the government has made in this space to date, with that budget funding being allocated in October. So that takes us through to, you know, the end of financial year, when we kind of get to the end of that internal process with the applicants. Another thing that we'll be putting a lot of effort and attention into concurrently is the working groups. And I think, you know, the industry-led collaborative working groups that we've established have really been the crown jewel of the National Blockchain Roadmap. As far as I'm concerned, I'm so grateful to our National Blockchain Roadmap steering committee members who have taken it upon themselves to chair or co-chair these working groups. We've had engagement from over 70 stakeholders through our roadmap activities, and most of that has been a result of the consultation that's been undertaken by those working groups, and also the volunteers from the industry who put their hands up to sign on as members or key contributors. But I'll get to the point of what's to come, what's the future of the working group model. With those discovery reports that the working groups have been preparing, we have been getting updates from the chairs of the working groups as they've gone along. And one of the key themes that's emerged from those working groups is that there really is a need for a cross-government response to barriers to blockchain. Those groups do serve those two functions of giving advice back to the department on what are the opportunities for applying the technology, but also what are the technical and regulatory and other barriers that might be holding back that opportunity from being realised. And because of the cross-cutting nature of some of the barriers that have been uncovered, what we have decided to do is establish a new working group. And this new working group will be within government. And what it will serve to do is coordinate our efforts across the Australian Public Service to explore these cross-cutting issues that have arisen out of the first 4 working groups that were focused on particular use cases of the technology. I'm being told that I'm very quickly running out of time here. So I also just want to let everybody on the call know that there will be opportunities for the industry to input to this new working group. We will be collaborating with Blockchain Australia to establish a new stakeholder feedback forum to capture all of your perspectives. And then where this will all wrap up, and I will also wrap up, is when we get to the end of the second year of the roadmap, we would be aiming to publish a second anniversary update report. So this will be a follow-up report from the initial launch of the roadmap in February last year that really captures, all right, we've done all this consultation and received all this information, and what have we actually done with it, and how all of that has evolved. So that takes us through to the end of second year of implementation. Again, I really appreciate all of the support from everyone who's gotten engaged, and there's certainly more opportunity to do that in the year to come. Handing back to you, Jane.
Oh, thank you, Chloe. And we would have loved you to keep talking for an awfully long time, but time is short. So really appreciate everything you've done. And everyone in the industry, dial 132-846. Lines are open until 8 p.m. and you can make a donation there. No, you've only got a week left to make application for this. So thanks so much, Chloe. And now we're going to move through some of the amazing people who are working on these working groups and leading them. And first, we're very proud of our Blockchain Innovation Hub at RMIT, a world-class university, a world-class innovation hub. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be sitting here next to Jason Potts and Chris Berg to talk to us about their work in credentials.
Thank you so much. I've got Jason and I, we'll just take 2 or 3 minutes at most. But so we have had the honor to run the credentials working group. And I might just quickly talk about how we did that and what we found. So we've provided the credentials working group report to the department. What we decided to take, we took the approach by starting with the industry itself. So we were interested in what was changing in the credentials ecosystem, the credentials industry, that blockchain was suitable for, was not suitable for, and what sort of things are happening that we can address with this rather exciting technology. And the very high level story is that the credentials industry, credentials being education credentials, licenses, right to work, all these sorts of things, has gone through dramatic and radical disruption over the last decade or so. No longer do you as a student expect to get all your education just from a tertiary education, a degree program leading to a master's, leading to some terminal degree. No, instead what you do now, and what universities and other organizations encourage you to do, is build micro-credentials produced by universities or produced by private sector organizations or produced by the company that you work for or a massive online course and so on and so forth. So we've got these huge ecosystem of credentials. Why is that interesting from a blockchain perspective? Well, blockchain is a technology and infrastructure that allows us to map those credentials together, to tie them together, to give students, to give employees and employers the capacity to interact with this huge diversity of credentials and authorizations that they now are. We think this is really important, not just from the industry's perspective, but from the government's perspective as well. Because if you think about it, the government produces or regulates the production of a vast amount of the credentials industry, and it is a dominant employer. It is a dominant consumer of credentials as well. So we think there's an important role for government in maintaining standards and ensuring that this technology can be adopted. But at the same time, our other message was that the blockchain being used for credentials is actually being driven by the market. It's being driven by innovators. It's being driven by an emerging and powerful edtech sector. It's being driven by consumer and employer demands. That's the high-level story that we had. But Jason, you had some deeper reflections, didn't you?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Yeah. So I mean, how we see that, as Chris indicated, is that the credentials industry, which for hundreds of years has basically been a monopoly ward of the university and higher ed sector, is profoundly being disrupted for tech reasons at the moment, and we're incredibly excited about that, because the possibility that this creates is that credentials are basically rights that enable a person to make a verifiable claim about some skill or just some capabilities or knowledge that they have, which enables them to interact with the rest of the economic system. So the idea, credentials then are just digital economic infrastructure. They overlap with identity, with licensing, with other permissioning systems. And what we're sort of seeing now is that blockchain technology is essentially enabling this market to experience a huge amount of innovation, and which then hopefully will drive down the cost of all sorts of economic interaction. So we see this as a productivity revolution, and this is something that will, it starts in the education sector, but will very quickly extend outside of that. So I mean, we're sort of very excited about the possibilities here. There's a significant role for government in facilitating this, industrial disruption and productivity revolution. But as Chloe has also pointed out, this requires a whole of government approach. So I think that's the next steps for us on this. So we'll hand back to you, Chloe.
Yeah, no, that's marvelous. Thank you very much. And I think it's also going to really drive workforce mobility as well and make that so much easier. So we'll move on now to our supply chain partners, who again, we've moved from academia now to industry partners who are leading a different aspect of the blockchain vertical. So I'll invite Katie Ford and Mark Staples to talk a little bit about what the supply chain group have been doing.
Hi, thanks. I think it's just myself speaking today, but thanks very much to Katie Ford, who was co-chairing the working group with me, and to all of the members of the working group, and also to the key contributors and all the other stakeholders we've been able to speak with. So I'll just spend a few minutes to pick out some of the interesting things I think we've discovered. So supply chains, they're kind of big, complex webs of business relationships. And if you kind of pull on one of those threads, you'll end up dragging out most of the economy behind it. So there's many different kinds of supply chains with different parties. They're different in many ways, different modes of transport. Goods have different sort of information characteristics and identities. The chains that are sometimes dynamic, sometimes they cross borders. So they're all very different in many ways, but they also, I think, from my point of view, have much more in common than they have different. So there's typically payments, information flow, often trade certificates, business identities, which are sort of common facets across most supply chains. So because blockchains give us new capabilities for creating and managing digital assets and for achieving decentralized coordination, a lot of people see there's a lot of potential benefit from using blockchains in supply chains. So we were asked to look at some of the challenges around blockchain adoption in supply chain. And one of the conclusions is that the challenge is it's not fundamentally a blockchain problem. Fundamentally, it's a problem of digital transformation of industry ecosystems. So we know, digital transformation is happening, within companies, within enterprise, within government. but blockchain gives us new options for transforming whole ecosystems, how businesses and government relate to each other. When we're thinking about supply chain, very often people think about provenance or traceability is the first kind of benefit we might get. Sometimes we heard that that's sometimes hard for individual participants in a supply chain to capture value from, if it's a kind of diffuse brand value proposition. So there's lots of other kinds of benefits that are also possible. So things like logistics improvements, waste reduction, reducing friction and the cost of reconciliation. A few kind of facets were recurring themes. So the opportunities around trade certificates, digitizing those, and also the potential for blockchain to improve trade finance in supply chain. So we're not, in our sort of short study, we're not really sure why there's kind of a market failure for having inventory and invoice financing across supply chains, but people were, there was this kind of indicating that blockchain may be able to provide evidence that could back risk assessments that could perhaps help address that gap in trade finance. There's a kind of a paradox in a sense that blockchain, we're recording facts about the world on the blockchain, and that's sort of partly about the physical world and partly about legal relationships. To get good quality data onto the blockchain, in a sense, you need a good quality supply chain in the first place. But if you have a good quality supply chain, then, is blockchain really going to add much more value? And so I think, in a way, blockchain, the opportunity is to kind of amplify the benefit you have from a good quality supply chain. And, domestically, Australia tends to have good quality supply chain. So that's I think the opportunity there is to see if we can take the sort of high quality production and manufacture we have in Australia and high quality supply chain and amplify the benefits we get from that for in various ways, all the various benefits we talked about before. I think I'll echo the sort of comments that were just made about the role of government. So here in supply chain, government and regulators aren't just sort of arm's length rule setting, but they're kind of actively involved in the sort of daily processes of supply chain, especially for either regulated goods or for trade certificates, for example, in international trade. So government has many roles here: setting regulation, facilitating industry standards, but input into standard setting, and also through, particularly through the lens of their joint operation in the supply chain processes across industry. And that's not just within Australia, but there's also this role internationally in trying to get, in a sense, what the first blockchain consensus we need is consensus about the digital transformation of international trade. So there were lots of things to cover, but hopefully I've given a flavour for some of the findings from the discovery report. Thanks.
No, thanks, Mark. And it's really great to hear that. But also just to echo what you said, that this, to be successful, is going to need a really significant collaboration with government, with industry, with academics, with startups and so forth. And so building the ecosystem, which has been the work of the early pioneers like Adam, has been really important. And many of you have been part of it. So let's just go on to the third group, which is cybersecurity, which is obviously a topic of huge importance to us all. And I'd invite Adriana Belotti and Steve Vallas to talk, and I will say briefly on that topic so that we can manage to also fit Hannah in.
I think that was for you, Steve.
I'm always brief, Jane. What are you saying? Thank you, Jane. The first thing I'd like to say, as the Deputy Chair of the Roadmap Steering Committee, echoing Chloe's comments and Tim's observations, it's been an amazing group. Like, people have committed their time. No one's being paid for this. They love the space. And it's been an incredible experience to work with so many people who love what they're doing in relation to blockchain. With respect to cybersecurity, it was an interesting one for us from the perspective of importance. I think we all recognise, those in the industry who are looking at it recognise it is very important. It's also been clear from the beginning, and the assumption was it was likely to be the case, that it's also very early. So a lot of the people in the cybersecurity space are not actively giving consideration to blockchain. And early on, there was a clear demarcation for us. Those that were in blockchain had an interest in cybersecurity and what it meant for their own networks and what they were building out. Those that were in cyber had less of an interest in blockchain, and this working group has focused on the latter rather than the former, because we've been trying to bring closer into the general blockchain community these use cases. So that was something just to sort of clearly delineate which options we were looking at. What also became very clear for us in having these conversations, primarily with a lot of people in cyberspace, is cyber itself needs more attention. Increasingly, it's an issue of national significance. So it has been the case that they are under-resourced, and would say with respect to Cyber, who are doing a great job, and a lot of the other organisations that work around this, they've got their hands full. So it's important to know from a blockchain perspective that it's hard to get the attention of people who are under-resourced with respect to what they're trying to do as well. So that also framed the process for us. And notwithstanding a lot of really interesting views, colourful views, differences in views, we're all collectively sort of forming a view that we all think it's important, and timing will be a critical element in that. So I'll pass to Adriana, who'll talk about some of the things we did to run this process.
We ran interview with members and key contributors of the working group, and those have been very interesting conversations. And as Steve said, those members of the working group who are in the blockchain space have a different view from members of the working group who are from the cybersecurity space. We also run a survey that was definitely targeted to cybersecurity professionals, and we have had a very modest response to that, which really illustrates how early we are in terms of getting the industry involved. Our discovery report is in the process of being finalized, and we've all been a little distracted this week, but we have the weekend and next week to finish it all off, and I think we're in the home run.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we do think it's important, regardless of where you sort of sit. I guess the takeaway from some of the conversations in the cyberspace is we need to articulate in a meaningful way and in a better way what the use case is, and why it's potentially better than the alternatives that exist in the market. And that's not something that's peculiar to cyber, but as an industry that seeks to interpose itself in a subject like cyber, I think it's important that we clearly articulate the value of what we're trying to bring. I think that's us. Is that it?
That's it.
That's it. That's us.
Thank you. That was very brief. Well done. So Adriana and Steve, much appreciated. Obviously, cyber and growing the industry in Australia and linking it with blockchain is very important to all of us. But you're just reinforcing a theme that comes through a lot, which is the need for education and for the development of understanding at government and heads of industry level about the transformative potential of this technology. So thank you so much for that. And I'll now go to Hannah Glass to talk about the work of the RegTech panel. Hannah, welcome back virtually.
And you're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute, Hannah.
Yeah.
Can't hear you. Unmute. Yeah.
I think you're still on mute, Hannah.
On mute.
There we go.
She don't? Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I'm done. Well, it's not a virtual session if someone hasn't had problems working out how to mute, unmute, and turn on and off their video. Thankfully, I haven't turned into some sort of animal, although it was a lawyer who was a cat, so who knows. But thank you so much. It's great to be back with all of you. And now in my capacity as chair of the RegTech working group. So much like the cybersecurity working group, we are still in the process of finalizing our discovery report. And that is partially because RegTech as a whole started as something where most people said, I don't really get how RegTech can exist outside of fintech. And if it's really fintech and financial services, well, why are we speaking to the Department of Industry? To people actually realizing that RegTech is so much broader than that initial sort of use case. And so I think that that's probably where we've started. Is we're incredibly fortunate in terms of the group who is working on this are diverse. The working group and the members involve lawyers, academics, VCs, entrepreneurs, startups, established businesses, and we also have the incredible fortune of having observers to our committee who have strong relationships with government themselves. So what that means is we've actually been able to bring together sort of the three sides of RegTech, being those who are regulated, those who are developing RegTech solutions, and also those who have a regulatory obligations in terms of surveying the industry. And so that has meant that we've sort of taken a three-pronged approach in what we're doing here to determine what each of those three sectors has been seeing within the RegTech field. Now, to go back to that first point I made about the breadth of RegTech, when people first looked at this, they said, well, it's really identity and KYC, and we've kind of done that to death, and isn't there a credentials working group? But when we pulled on that thread, much like Mark and Katie in the supply chain working group, we found that there was so much here, and it was completely interconnected throughout the Australian economy. And the reason why is because regulation really does underpin a lot of what we do. Commercial relationships are given effect to through law and legal requirements and legal enforceability. And so we took this broad view, looking at anywhere the technology was used to meet legal, regulatory, or compliance obligations. And they could have been obligations set by a regulator, they could have been obligations set by an industry body, because we wanted to see where the technology was and how far it could go and how far it was going. And we've received an incredible response. We conducted a survey which has 35 completed responses, and I think approximately 60 partially or fully completed responses, which is pretty amazing. We have conducted so far, and are continuing to speak to people, over 30 interviews, discussing some of the issues and testing some of those, some of the information that was received through the survey. And then, of course, we've held roundtable discussions with industry, including Blockchain Australia, but also other industry groups like FinTech Australia and RegTech Association. And then, of course, our working group has met together to discuss and assess these as well. So where have we landed? As I said before, we found that RegTech and regulation really is one of the bedrocks of commerce within this country. And we found that RegTech solutions exist in a very broad area. So there are RegTech solutions in the mining industry, there are RegTech solutions in supply chains, there are RegTech solutions in agriculture, there are RegTech solutions in all sorts of different areas which you wouldn't usually think of as requiring regulation. But it's there and it's underneath, and it is so important to each of these industries to be able to comply. So that's one of the key findings so far, is what is RegTech and how broad is it? And yeah, it's significant. In terms of where people are using this, that was the other key thing we wanted to work out, is not where have people thought it might be used, but where is it actually being used? And again, when we really started to delve into that broad definition of RegTech and the broad application of regulation, that is when we found some of these real world use cases. And we're talking here applications which are either in production or late stage pilot. And the beauty of all of these is they're real and they're Australian. And we've got a number of other different findings. We're still working through this. We're still consulting. So if you have any feedback, please feel free to get in touch with us. But what I will say is that the working group is absolutely phenomenal. And together we are really taking the broadest approach possible, listening to all aspects of this industry, because this is something that is important across the blockchain world.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to all of the other incredible leaders of these working groups. Everyone's doing it on a voluntary basis, and it's just a sign about how important that people think it is. And just to Adam and Ron and the early pioneers, and Stevie, who's made all this possible, and Chloe and Tim, thank you so much for leading it in government, because having the government behind this and supporting it and seeing the vision and the possibilities for Australia is really important. And I was so happy to hear about your APS blockchain network, and I hope it just grows and grows and grows. And everyone, don't forget, dial 132846 by 8 p.m. tonight, and you too have an opportunity to put in a submission for this, the pilot opportunities with the government. So thank you, everyone. It's just been amazing connecting with all of you. and seeing this industry, which, as Adam described from the very beginning in the early days, has grown up so much. There's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of challenges with the technology that we need to overcome, whether it's regulation or interoperability or speed or gas consumption or you name it. But it's great to see that everyone's working on it. And I just want to put out a challenge, because we've been talking for quite a while about how great the small island states have been in, you know, really taking some of the lead in blockchain technology. So let's take a sort of like a bit bigger island state and see if we can't make a noise out there in the world. So thank you, everyone. Great session, really terrific to be here with you today.
Thank you, Jane. Yep.